excuse about the coldness of the weather and so on, so that to explain a very small turnout, but now I don't have to make that excuse. We have a very good audience, and I thank you so much for coming. Professor Bruce Russell has been a faculty member at Wayne State's in Wayne State's Philosophy Department since 1978, and he has served as chair of the department for 10 years. He received his BA, MA, and PhD at the University of California, Davis, and given his youthful looks, I suspect that we hired him straight out of Davis after the completion of his doctorate. Is that true?
Is that, what's that again? I did what?
You were hired straight from Davis.
Yes.
Wonderful. Bruce is past president of the Central States Philosophical Association and the author of an entry on a priori justification and knowledge in the online Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy. He has authored an entry on moral intuitionism in the International Encyclopedia of Ethics. He writes on a number of positions in philosophy. For example, in epistemology, he defends a form of foundationalism, which is the view that knowledge and justification rest on a foundation that does not itself stand in need of a justification, yet can confer justification on our beliefs. In ethics, he defends the view that there are necessary moral truths that we can know via intuition. For example, we know that it is wrong to torture children just to hear them scream. In philosophy of religion, he argues that the problem of evil gives us reason to believe that God does not exist. In the philosophy of film, his view is that fiction films can provide answers to philosophical questions, but they also raise philosophical questions and present what amounts to counterexamples of philosophical theses. He's author of the Philosopher's POV on the blog Real Deal Mind. There he discusses such films as Margin Call, Melancholia, Shame, Up in the Air, The Fantastic Mr. Fox, and so on. I want to, as director of the Humanities Center, I want to issue a heartfelt thank you to Bruce for sharing his philosophical views with the humanities community over the years. For example, this is his 5th Brownback talk. In 2001, 2002, he spoke on the matrix, knowledge, reality, and the good. In 2005, 2006, he spoke on against relativism. In 2006, 2007, he spoke on the limits of philosophy and film. In 2009, 2010, Pedro Almodovar's film, The Exploration of Love. He has been a part of the Justice Studies Group that the center funded for several years, between 1999 and 2002. He has won 2 of our faculty fellowships, one on the environment, and he gave a faculty fellowship presentation in 2008, 2009, and he won one on the existence, the religion and the secular, and gave a talk in 2003 on the existence of God. And he took part in our symposium on humanities and civic engagement. And because of all of that, I can give him a free plug and say that he owns a ranch and a small vineyard in California, and that if you want to purchase his wine, Esther Russell, you can purchase it at the Lark, Cameron's 222, and the Fine Wine Source in Livonia. So with all of that, I want to introduce to the podium Professor Bruce Russell, who will speak to us on jealousy and envy.
Thanks, Walter. I concluded from your introduction 2 things. That guy's been here too long, and he's worn out his welcome here at the Humanities Center.
No, not at all, not at all.
But okay, now we can start. I have a handout. I wonder if you can help me. I'll just maybe I'll give me one, will you, Jim, so I know what the handout's. So there's been quite a bit written about jealousy and envy, and I think people in psychology and psychiatry have ideas about what these things are too, as well as philosophers. I'm going to try to give an analysis of both jealousy and envy. By that I mean I'm going to attempt to list a bunch of conditions that singly are necessary for jealousy and jointly are sufficient things. And the same thing I'm going to try to do for envy. So that's my project. And then at the end, I'm going to talk about their value. Does one have intrinsic disvalue and not the other, or do both? And can both be instrumentally good and also instrumentally bad? That is, bad as means to doing something. I'm going to talk about value at the end of my talk. So you all have, well now Layla will, you all have a handout, and I'm going to go through the handout. And now somebody might think that you can give the essence of jealousy and envy simply in terms of some kind of affect, that there are affects that are associated with these mental states, but I don't think actually you can capture the essence of them, unlike in the case of, say, fear or anger, that I think are essentially feelings and don't have necessary conditions involving desires and beliefs. But I'm going to say otherwise with respect to jealousy and envy. So at first, I note that jealousy is typically associated with suspiciousness, rejection, hostility, anger at others, fear of loss and hurt. But no one of these experiences is necessary nor sufficient for jealousy. That is, you could have one or the other or whatever, so no one's necessary. And I'm actually going to say that jointly they're not even sufficient. And envy is also typically associated with feelings, maybe different ones, of inferiority, dissatisfaction, wishfulness and longing, self-criticism, and the motivation to improve, but no one of those experiences is necessary nor sufficient for envy either. Then what about, are they together sufficient? I don't think so. I think an example of a miser is a possible counterexample, that the miser might feel, in the case of envy, a miser might feel inferior, might be dissatisfied, he might have wishes and longing and self-criticism, be motivated to improve, but no one of these experiences is sufficient, nor altogether, I think, sufficient for having envy. But in the case of jealousy, I mean, it's 1C now, some relevant affect for a variety of possible ones is necessary for jealousy, and I think similarly for envy, some affect is necessary to have envy and also jealousy. And I think it must, in the case of jealousy, be a negative affect when it comes to jealousy, but not for envy. For instance, the motivation to improve is not a negative mental state, and that might be the relevant affect in the case, a particular case of envy. Now, what about a case where a person has low self-esteem? I think this might be, actually I meant this to be, let's see, let me look at this again. I actually meant the miser, sorry, I used it in the wrong context. I meant the miser to be a counterexample to the jealousy claim, that suppose the miser was suspicious and felt rejected and had hostility and anger at others, and he feared loss of his money and hurt and so forth. I don't think that that miser necessarily be jealous of anybody. And with a person of low self-esteem, that person might not be envious, though they feel inferior, dissatisfied, and all those things I list under the typical kinds of affect associated with envy. So that's why I reject the possibility of giving an analysis of either of these notions simply in terms of affect. Well, what needs you do in order then to give some kind of analysis of these concepts? I'm at 2 now. The analysis of jealousy and envy must be given in part in terms of relevant beliefs and desires. And here's an important example that'll be crucial to what I say later about jealousy and envy. I actually have this friend in the university who met up with her boyfriend from high school of 40 years ago almost, and they fell in love again, and now she's going to marry him and leave her job at the university and go somewhere else with him, and so they have this rekindled romantic relationship after a 40-year hiatus and having been married to other people in between and so on and so forth. Now there are 2 versions of this, I think. I'll call her Jane and him Don. In the one version, I'm friends with Jane and want a relationship with some woman like the relationship between Jane and Don. I'm envious of Don because he has that kind of relationship with Jane. Compare this to the second scenario. I'm in love with Jane and want an exclusive romantic and sexual relationship with her. It does not matter whether I already have a romantic and sexual relationship with her or only love her from afar. That's not really important. And I am jealous of Don in this case because he has a romantic and sexual relationship with Jane, that particular person, thereby making it impossible for me to have the exclusive relationship with her that I desire. So this can be crucial. In the first case, I want that kind of relationship, and I'm envious of Don because he has it with Jane, but I don't really care if I have it with Jane. Jessica or Janet would be fine if I had that kind of relationship with one of those women. That'd be okay with me. In the second case, it's not fine. I want that relationship with Jane, and I want it exclusively with Jane. And that, I think, is a crucial difference why the second case involves jealousy, the first envy. So here's an analysis of jealousy proposed by this author, Luke Pershaus. I cite the place. X is jealous of Y if and only if, 1, X desires to possess, and then I put in brackets what I think he should have put in, to possess what he regards as a good, possibly to a certain extent or in a certain way, for instance, exclusively or preeminently. Second, X regards the actual potential possession of that good by another person, say in my example, Don, the rival, is inconsistent with the fulfillment of this desire, my desire to have exclusive relationships with Jane. Third, X has in mind some possibly imagined set of circumstances in which the desire would have been satisfied. I'm going to talk quite a bit about 3 and reject it ultimately. And finally, X has some relevant negative affect because of 1 and 2. That is, I'm thinking 1 and 2, the desire and the belief, cause this feeling of jealousy. And the feeling has to be there. Pershaus actually doesn't list 4, but he talks in his essay, what he says in his essay makes you think that he would assent to having 4 in there, because he only gives necessary conditions. He doesn't try to give ones that are both necessary and together sufficient. So why 3, I say? Why does Pershaus think that you have to have in mind some possible imagined set of circumstances where the desire would have been satisfied? Well, he thinks that some teenage girl could not be jealous of the girlfriend of the rock star she's in love with. So the girlfriend is in love with Jay-Z. She can't be jealous of Beyonce, says he. And another example he gives is suppose he's British, suppose he wanted to be prime minister, but he doesn't think he can be jealous of Tony Blair. He just takes those examples as being intuitively obvious, and I'm going to question whether they are and bring up some other examples and the like. But those 2 examples about the teenager and him with respect to Blair are what motivate his putting condition 3 in his analysis. I say why 3? I think a teenager could be jealous of the girlfriend of a rock star if she wants to have an exclusive romantic relationship with him. She wants to have this exclusive romantic relationship with Jay-Z, and there's that darn Beyonce on the scene. She's jealous of Beyonce. Why not? doesn't seem obvious that she couldn't be. And Pursehouse, I think, could be jealous of Tony Blair's being prime minister. If he wants to be prime minister at the time Blair is, envious of him if he wants to be prime minister someday. That is, if he wants to be prime minister now, and Tony Blair is prime minister, that's a particular time, and he wants to be prime minister, and that, I think, makes jealousy possible. But if he just wants to be prime minister someday, and darn, I'm envious of Blair because he's prime minister. I want to be prime minister someday, and it doesn't even look like I'm going to get it, but it's not really Blair is standing in my way. He's not like my rival, and the sort of paradigm case about Jane and Don in example scenario 2. What else? Pursehouse himself, I think, gives a counterexample to 3. He gives an example of an impotent husband who wants to have exclusive sexual relations with his wife, but there's this other person, I guess the villain Don, let's bring him back. He's having relationships with even Pursehouse, even the impotent husband's wife. This guy Don's getting around. So he thinks, well, I think that the impotent husband doesn't satisfy condition 3 because let's see, he says, 3 says, he has in mind some possibly imagined set of circumstances in which the desire would have been satisfied. Well, I guess maybe in a sense he could, that he imagines he's not impotent anymore, and he, has exclusive relations with his wife and so forth. But in that sort of broad sense of imagined possible circumstances, the teenager can do that too. She can imagine, oh, Beyonce's out of the scene, out of the running, and I go to one of Jay-Z's concerts, and he falls in love with me, and that's it, She could imagine that. So I don't think you can have it both ways in saying that the impotent husband can be jealous because he can meet condition 3, but the teenager can't because she can't. And as a matter of fact, when he actually defends this, he invokes actually condition 2 about, the person basically standing in the way, the rivals having, the rival Jay-Z having Beyonce's inconsistent with the teenager having this relationship. So when he actually makes the case in his article, he abandons 3 and appeals to 2 to make the case that the impotent husband satisfies the conditions for jealousy. But he's not actually citing 3. And here are some counterexamples, I think, to 3 that I've constructed. I'm jealous of my wife who will be able to see our daughter born, say her first words, take her first steps, attend school for their first time, etc. And I won't because, and then there are 2 scenarios, I must be out of the country during this time, or 2, I will die of cancer before my pregnant wife gives birth to our daughter. Those are 2 scenarios on the sort of general scenario I gave there, 2 specific interpretations. Couldn't I be jealous of my wife having these relationships in the future with our yet-to-be-born daughter, even though I'm not going to be around? So I don't see in what sense, it's possible. I can imagine a situation. In that scenario, how can I imagine it's being possible that I have this good that I want? Because by stipulation, I'm not around in order to have that relationship with my daughter, so it can't really be imagined to be possible, as 3 requires. But nevertheless, I think I can be jealous. So 3 would say, since it's necessary and it's not met, it would imply that if it were necessary that I couldn't be jealous. I think intuitively I can. A second one, well, what about another, Don's making an appearance again. What about if I'm jealous of Don, who will have a romantic and sexual relationship with Jane after I'm dead 10 years from now? Couldn't I also be jealous of that, of Don in the future when I'm not around? It's a kind of similar scenario to the wife and daughter case. I'm not around, and so I can't really imagine myself in that situation, so condition 3 wouldn't be satisfied. So Purshouse's analysis implies I couldn't be jealous, but I think intuitively I could be jealous in B. And then I say what I did a minute ago about how Pershouse actually defends his view that the impotent person, husband, could be jealous. He actually appeals to a different condition than he really should be citing. Now, Rachel Fredericks is a young philosopher who recently wrote a dissertation called, I cited there, Troubling Others and Tormenting Ourselves. It's mostly about jealousy, her dissertation, and you probably know, if you've been jealous, how these things are true. That is, it troubles us and we torment others, and it's about the nature and moral significance of jealousy. And she says she can't be jealous of the fact that Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Susan B. Anthony were best friends, though she wishes that she were the best friend of either. And I say, why not? Maybe because they're dead? Why can't she be jealous of their friendship? But why not? If I can be jealous of other people who survived my death, if that death is compatible with jealousy, as in the two examples I gave before about my wife and the daughter, and Don's relationship with Jane when I'm dead 10 years later. Why not? If I can be jealous of other people who survived my death, if that death is compatible with jealousy, why not the death of others? And even if true, I think it does not support a condition as strong as 3. It doesn't support a condition about the ability to imagine. You might have a very weak imagination. You can't imagine this, but it doesn't mean you can't be jealous because you have a weak imagination. Well, how about the other one? Because she cannot be best friends with either of them because they are best friends to each other. Best is a superlative. You can't be best to two different people. But even if that's true, it does. But that sort of unique good is just what founds jealousy. You know, that was the unique thing about in the example about Jane and Don. It was a unique thing that I wanted that relationship only with Jane, and here's darn Don on the scene here getting in the way. That's the kind of thing that just is the foundation of jealousy. So the mere fact that she couldn't be best friends because they already are best friends among themselves shouldn't imply that she couldn't be jealous. So my conclusion is that this condition 3 in Pershouse is really not necessary. Now, the question's an interesting question. I think people in psychology and psychiatry sometimes differ on this issue, and it's a question about whether you need 3 people involved for jealousy, contrary to what some have thought, and especially what some have thought about envy, where you only need 2 people. If you're envious of somebody, you don't need a 3rd person. I can be, as I'll say later, envious of Ted Turner's wealth, and I don't need a 3rd person around in order to be envious. But some people think that jealousy requires 3 people, as in my Jane and Don example. I'm jealous of Don because of his relationship to Jane, because I want an exclusive relationship to Jane, and there are obviously 3 people involved in the particular case I gave, but is that really necessary, or can you have jealousy of someone where there's just you and that other person? I think so. Here are examples from Pershouse. If I want to be the only one in the university to own a Rolls Royce, philosophers are known for fantastic examples, and you buy one, then I can be jealous of you, I think. No 3rd person need be involved. Second, what if I want to own the fastest car in the block? You buy a faster one. I'm jealous. 2 people. You who own the fastest car and me who wants to. These examples show that what is regarded as good need not be particular, as it is in the Jane Don example, but it must at least be unique. Only one person can own the only Rolls Royce in the university, and only one person can own the fastest car in the block. The reason it's not particular is because I don't care what Rolls Royce I own. You know, it doesn't have to be this one. It can be any one, but I want it to be the only one on the block. So it doesn't have to be a particular Rolls Royce. And when you buy one, it doesn't have to be a particular Rolls Royce. You know that silver one with a really fancy chrome all around? No, it doesn't have to be that one. Anyone, when you buy that other Rolls Royce, I'm going to be jealous because I want to be the only person in the university who owns a Rolls Royce. that's actually why I asked Walter to do that advertisement, because I was hoping that all of you would buy a case of wine, and then I'd be well on my way to buying that rolls. Yeah, right. So here's my proposed analysis of jealousy. X desired to possess what X regards as being a unique good because he wants to possess what he considers to be an exclusive, preeminent, or particular good. He believes that some other person, Y, possesses, will possess, or has possessed some good that makes it impossible for X to possess the unique good he desires, and that is referred to in the first condition. And then he has some relevant negative affect as a result of his desire in 1 and his belief in 2. You get the general idea that there's some particular good that I want, and I think that this other guy is blocking me from having it. As a result, I don't feel good. I feel bad in some way or another. Jealous. Now, what about the analysis of envy? Let me just start with a Let me just start with a couple examples. There's the Jane and Don example, remember again, that where I'm just friends, I'm good friends with Jane, but I'm not romantically involved with her, sexually involved, or I don't have those desires. But I do envy Don's relationship to her because it's that kind of relationship I would like to have and don't. And secondly, the Ted Turner example. I can be envious of Ted Turner's wealth. Seems possible, right? And I say in my paper, it's not a particular guy. I don't mean I want his dollars. Those are marked by Ted Turner, you know, with his initials or something like that, all those billions of dollars. No, I want wealth, you know. And as I say in my paper, well, ask Warren Buffett or Bill Gates. There's plenty to go around, so I don't have to actually have Ted Turners. Now, what is my proposal? I'm just going to skip to my proposal of envy. So I say it involves these things. You desire to possess what you regard as good, and what you regard as good is not unique. That is, it's possible for more than one person to possess it. More than one person can possess that kind of romantic love that I see between Don and Jane. More than one person can possess the amount of wealth that Ted Turner does, etc. Third, you believe that you don't have the good and that Y does now, or will possess it, or has possessed this good, and X has some relevant affect because of the belief and desire mentioned in 1 and 3. Here's a possible counterexample from Rachel Fredericks. She says she can be envious of Mohammed VI because he is now king of Morocco, even though she cannot be king, given that she's a woman and not Moroccan. That is a particular good, but she says that she could be envious of him. And remember I said that envy requires general goods, jealousy particular ones or unique ones. So this seems like a counterexample. Here's a particular good that she can be envious of Mohammed VI. You get the idea? Counterexample. I think she can be jealous, but not envious. The other examples I considered show that jealousy does not require a possibility condition, so the mere fact that it's not possible for Fredericks to be king of Morocco does not mean that jealousy is impossible. She could be envious that she's not royalty. She'd like to be a queen somewhere. But I don't think she can, but not that she is not king of Morocco. So what's my summary? My summary of the main difference between jealousy and envy is, the crucial difference between jealousy and envy is that jealousy involves a unique good and envy cannot. And now my last little bit about value. Some things are intrinsically valuable, other things are instrumentally valuable, so lots of people say happiness is intrinsically valuable. It's good in itself apart from its consequences. But other things, I don't know, exercise or, I don't know, taking medicine that's painful or it makes you sick, going to the dentist, are instrumentally good if they're good at all, but they're not intrinsically good. It's not intrinsically good to have pain. But sometimes it's instrumentally good because the only way to get less pain or pleasure in the future or happiness is to endure some pain now as a means to some good end. So I'm just making the distinction between intrinsic and instrumental goods. And here's what I say about their intrinsic value. I think jealousy always has negative intrinsic value because the affect associated with it is necessarily negative, not so with envy. So there's always something bad about jealousy, this negative affect, but I think some of the affects that are associated with envy need not be. So for instance, a desire to improve yourself. You might have that as an effect of envy, and I don't think that that's a negative affect. B, the instrumental value. I think both can be either instrumentally good or bad. Bad if they lead the jealous or envious person to harm the rival or others. You sometimes have people who are jealous or envious and they want to harm or get the rival out of the way, and that would be a bad effect. And it could happen, I think, either with jealousy or envy. You could have this bad effect. What about the good effect? I think that there, in either case of jealousy or envy, it's possible it actually has good consequences. I think most people believe this about envy, that you envy something because of their what they have or their position or something like that, and then you strive. It motivates you to try to achieve that yourself, and you don't step on anybody or kill a rival or do any of those things, and you're just motivated to acquire these good character traits or some possession or power or position or whatever it is that you envy. And jealousy, though, I think not as often, but can have good effects too. So you might, sorry, Don's coming back. Here's Don again, and he has these good character traits. And you think the reason that Jane loves Don is because he has character traits A, B, C, and you don't have them. And that's, you say, by gum, I'm going to go out and get those good character traits A, B, C, because maybe, of course I don't wish this, maybe something will happen to Don, and then I will have character traits A, B, C, and I will go, approach Jane, and she will just love me like crazy, something like that. So it could have, being jealous could actually have good effects too. So I don't think really, from the value standpoint, there's any significant difference in the instrumental value of either envy or jealousy. But jealousy, I think, necessarily has this negative affect, which makes it intrinsically bad in the way that envy is not. Okay, I'm back.
I liked your paper, Bruce. I'm not entirely convinced on your rejection of 3.
Possibility.
Yeah, so on your counterexamples, I'm jealous of my wife will be able to see our daughter born, and I won't because I must be out of the country or I will die of cancer. In both of those cases, there's a set of circumstances I can imagine where the desire would be satisfied, namely one where my plans for my trip change or I don't die. So it doesn't seem like that, in fact, constitutes a counterexample to 3. And the same thing with your counterexample B. Don will have a romantic sexual relationship with Jane after I'm dead 10 years from now. Well, again, if I can imagine the circumstances where I'm cured of whatever it is that's causing me to die, then there is this imagined possibility of my satisfying the desire. And then going to Rachel Frederick's example, it's Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Susan B. Anthony. So it doesn't seem like I can be jealous of their friendship. Now, why is that? I guess I could imagine living during their time, but it seems like that possibility is far more remote. I mean, we could say like the possible world in which that if it is indeed possible for me to be born on a different date from that on which I was born, it seems like that possibility is just much more remote than the possibility where I live a little bit longer or I don't go out of the country. So for those reasons, I'm just not convinced of the counterexample.
Yeah, okay, thanks. So the last one, the Canton-Anthony example, so your intuition is she couldn't be jealous of those people, but you think why couldn't I be jealous in the impotent husband case, either versions? The ones, isn't that right? The impotent husband, either where I have to go out of the country or, oh, sorry, isn't that?
Is the husband impotent in these cases? Not necessarily, right? This is
No, that's the daughter one,
for
yeah.
A and B.
Yeah, okay, the daughter one, right. So, there are two things I have to say. I don't really know. In the case of when I'm going to take the one where I'm going to die of cancer, I think that world, that possible world in which I don't die of cancer, is just as far away as the possible world in which I'm around when Stanton and Caddy live.
Really?
Yeah.
Maybe this shows the danger of possible world talk, right?
I'm just thinking it is very slippery. But I'm thinking that, the laws of nature would have to be changed in order for me, given my circumstance of really advanced cancer, for me to survive, long enough to have these experiences of my daughter and wife. That the laws of nature would have to change. And the laws of, well, maybe the laws of nature would have to change for me to be alive back then, but I don't know whether they have to change more radically, because what if my parents, you kind of go back and their parents, they I don't know if this is possible, their parents had their children earlier, and those parents had their children earlier, and so forth, and finally I was actually born at the time when Stanton and Caddy existed. Now maybe there's really hard questions about whether I could, because maybe being born at this time from this sperm and egg are necessary conditions for being me. I don't think, so anyway, my answer is I don't see those worlds as being different in their nearness, relevantly different. The second thing I had to say is it's dangerous for Purshouse, that's just, ad hominem, because he wanted to introduce this because of the teenager and him, the teenager, be impossible. He had an intuition. It's impossible for the teenager to be jealous of the rock star. But maybe you don't, do you not share that intuition?
Well, so is this teenager not of dateable age? I mean, are we talking about a 13-year-old? Is that the problem, or just that?
No.
Oh, well, in that case, then sure, it's possible, because the teenager can imagine circumstances in which she's dating Jay-Z. So that example didn't bother me. Let me try one more thing. I don't want to dominate the conversation. I mean, I can imagine, and we know of cases where people are cured of cancer, whereas a case where someone is born in a different century from the century in which they were born, that strikes me as more remote. But maybe like a different case. So my grandfather, he turns 97 next month, and he sometimes talks about, he hopes to live long enough to see my 2-year-old niece get on the school bus.
Is his name Don?
No, his name is not Don. Maybe that's what's keeping him alive. But okay, so he won't live long enough to see my niece graduate from college, right? I mean, just to talk about laws, he's 97, he's not going to live another 20 years. And so he might say he's jealous of those of us who will, but I think that would be a weird claim at that point, that he would be experiencing jealousy toward those of us who are young enough to, conceivably watch my niece graduate from college. Or if he were to say he's jealous in that case, I'm like, jealous? Is that really what you mean? So
then you should say that about my case of being jealous of my wife seeing my daughter interact. Because I'm assuming that's not possible.
Well, but again, I do think it's possible. I mean, it's possible that people are cured of cancer. But to the extent that I think that it's completely impossible, then I do think jealousy might be a strange way of putting it. So, for whatever that's worth.
So I'm going to apply your analysis of jealousy and envy to a case and see if I'm applying it. So let's say that I really want a red Rolls Royce, and in one possible world, Rolls Royce produced 100 of them, and you have one. On your analysis, I'm envious of you. In another possible world, let's say Rolls-Royce only produced one red Rolls-Royce. And they're going to say, you can't paint any Rolls-Royces red, okay? There's only one unique red Rolls-Royce.
Maybe they have a
in that
surface
case,
one,
I'm jealous of you. But it's odd that this empirical fact about how many Rolls-Royces this company produces would change my sentiment. And I could say, well, it's weird that this fact about the world changes whether I have jealousy or envy. And I mean, yeah, I could imagine circumstances in which I could obtain a red Rolls-Royce, but it doesn't matter whether there's 1 or 100, because I can't on my salary. So,
Really?
So yeah, and so can you tell me? So my intuition is that if I'm jealous in one case, I'm jealous in the other. If I'm envious in one case, I'm envious in the other.
Yeah. Okay, now that is a nasty case that I thought
You have to give a short answer because I have to go to class.
my analysis implied. And I thought about the darn thing was that I said if I wanted to be the person who owned the only Rolls Royce in the university, well then I'd be jealous. However, if I just wanted to own a Rolls Royce, in both cases you get one and then I can't be the only one. Or in the other case, I just want to own a Rolls Royce and you get one, and I have to say I'm envious in the second case, but I'm jealous when it's the unique thing that I want to own the only Rolls Royce in the university. If I just want to own one and you get one, in both cases you get one, but I have to say in one case I'm jealous, in the other case I'm envious. So, what do you say to this, Bruce? I think that our intuitions about envy and jealousy are not completely clear in lots of cases, and there's some paradigm cases like the Jane Donne case, and maybe some other cases about envy in Ted Turner's Wealth or something like that. And there's a whole gray area in between, and at this point I'm letting the theory drive my judgments. That is, I think this theory is really simple, and in those cases I'm going to more or less bite the bullet and say, yeah, it does have that consequence, but I don't think our intuitions are really sharp in those cases. And secondly, I don't know any other theory that I've read so far that will allow you to distinguish those cases that don't have other untoward consequences somewhere else.
Why does this matter? Is it just a matter of taxonomy, or is it because jealousy has negative connotations that envy does not have?
It's true that, I mean, philosophers are kind of interested for its own sake in getting clear about what's what. Because I think we think if people don't get clear about concepts, then they, somewhere down in their reasoning, go wrong and reach conclusions because they've confused A with B. So a general motive in philosophy, I think, is to be clear to prevent invalid reasoning somewhere in who knows where. I do think it might have the practical consequence if I say what I say about envy and jealousy shows maybe that they're much closer than you might have thought, then I think it would be hard-pressed for you to value them differently. And so what you're saying about the negative connotation would go away, or at least be mitigated, except for what I said about the affect of jealousy being always negative. But I think a lot of people think, for the most part, jealousy is destructive, is harmful, and leads to bad consequences. And that's just an empirical claim about what, for the most part, happens, but it doesn't speak to the essential nature of jealousy. And so I want to make people, sort of put on the brakes a little bit and say, well, maybe that's just the way it is in fact, but it's not the way it must be about jealousy and envy.
Yes, Professor, thank you. In the 7 deadly sins, if I'm not mistaken, envy is listed, but jealousy is not. Am I right there?
I don't know. That's true.
Envy is one of them, and jealousy is not. And I was wondering what the, why that is. Like, back in the day when they invented, when they wrote that down, 7 deadly sins, why was it they put envy there and not jealousy? Or was jealousy even considered part of it at that time? Was there a split?
I don't know. One of my graduate students told me, she's a religious person, told me that according to the Christian tradition, But I don't know which one. One of these things can be said of God, but not the other. And so maybe there's actually some religious,
God is a jealous God.
what's that?
God is a jealous God.
But he's not envious.
Right.
Yeah, so he's a jealous God, but what is he jealous of?
Our love.
Our love. Uh-huh. He wants our love, and we're not giving it to him. Some people are not giving it to him. I see. So that's not a bad thing. But I think that's kind of ironic, because what you were saying is maybe jealousy has a more negative connotation nowadays than envy. But then if God has it, well, of course, God doesn't have any bad traits, and so that would be, in that view, it would be that jealousy isn't a vice. But so maybe it's historical. John is supporting that view that there's a reason why jealousy isn't on the list, because God's jealous, and we wouldn't want to have that as one of the 7 deadly sins. That's probably the historical reason. My attempt is to say they're not really that different, and so they shouldn't really be judged from a value standpoint as being that different. But jealousy is always in some way bad for the person who's jealous, because it's like having a pain, which is bad in itself, although it might be instrumentally good. To have pain is bad in itself, and so to have jealousy is bad in itself. And sometimes I'm saying envy doesn't have a negative affect, and so it's not bad in itself. So in a way, that view says take envy off the list, put jealousy, if you're going to put either on the list, in its place. Here, can I
I couldn't quite tell exactly, but it looked like jealousy implies envy. That on your definitions, that if you're jealous of someone, you're thereby envious of them, and the main difference then is that to convert envy to jealousy, you have to add some uniqueness condition.
But I think it's not possible, because in the Jane Don case, I think he can be only jealous of Don, that he's not really concerned about having that kind of relationship with someone. He just wants that romantic sexual relationship with Jane, and Don stands in his way. And so he'll be jealous, but not envious of Don.
Okay. Sorry, maybe I was misreading. So in your account of envy, it says that you regard that the envious person regards the good as not unique. And in the account of jealousy, it says regards the good as unique. So there, instead of, you could simply, there's a more general state, maybe in regard to the taxonomy question, it seems kind of irrelevant to your own personal, your own inner state, whether you regard the good as unique or not. Probably.
Yeah, the affect, you mean. Your inner, is that what you mean by your inner state?
Yeah, and also your, well.
It's like, here's an analogy, Eric, about remorse and regret, that I think they might feel the same, but remorse necessarily has the belief that you've done something wrong, but regret doesn't. But you might feel both remorse and regret about doing something. And that's what the analogy is exact for me for envy and jealousy. They're not the same, but of course you might feel both in a particular case.
And then the difference is whether you believe the thing's unique or not, is pretty much what it amounts to.
Yeah.
Okay.
One more layer. Mitt Romney didn't attend the inauguration yesterday.
Yeah.
And in fact, he was quoted as having said that not only would he not attend, he probably wouldn't watch it on television.
Uh-huh.
And a commentator I heard said, well, it's perfectly understandable. And
Uh-huh.
it's jealousy, certainly. It's perfectly understandable given the situation. You know, regardless of what you think of Mitt Romney's politics, you know, he very much wanted to be president of the United States. Only one person could become president of the United States, at least in this election.
Yeah.
And it wasn't him.
That's right.
Yeah.
His rival won.
So the commentator said, it's perfectly understandable. In other words, I think it would clearly fit under your definition of jealousy, under anyone's definition of jealousy, but not necessarily morally reprehensible. Perfectly understandable. The bad thing was that he came out and said so, that it was bad form for him to make a point
Yeah.
of saying that he was not attending and probably not even watching on television.
Yeah.
That sounds like another layer.
It's there in the end of my paper. That what I wanted to say was that both envy and jealousy could be instrumentally good or bad. Sometimes they're good, sometimes they're bad. It depends on what this state, this mental state, causes or leads people to do. So if he had been jealous, but then came out, I don't know, and praised Obama or said something
So
nice
something
about,
bipartisan.
yeah, then it wouldn't have had bad consequences, and so then it wouldn't have been condemnable, I think. But it's because it led him to do bad things on this occasion that particular action was condemnable.
That, in fact, it might have been even morally superior if he had gone to the inauguration and all the time kept saying to himself, boy, I wish that was me.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, but I'm going to show up anyway because it's the better thing to do to close ranks,
Right,
notwithstanding my jealousy.
right. That would have had, I think, both good consequences. That's why I was saying sometimes jealousy can have good consequences, just like envy does. Envy makes you sometimes emulate the person you envy and do good things. And there's these terms that are used in the literature, destructive and emulative envy, and I think they apply as well to jealousy. So I agree with you completely. If he'd done the things that you say, it would have been a good thing, and it might have been caused by his jealousy, and there's an example of where jealousy is instrumentally good. Furthermore, you can judge not only actions, but people's character. And it would have spoken well to Romney's character because he overcame this jealousy to do the right thing. Sorry, Leila.
That's okay. I'm out of your.
Yes, that's right. I moved up
We
too
need
far.
to
Now
back
move back. Okay, go. Sorry, Leila was there and I didn't get her earlier.
My intuition throughout your talk was to actually transpose these two terms.
Uh-oh.
So my question is it the literature and the research that has been done that has sort of placed these terms the way that you're using them?
No, not really. I mean, there's the Purse House essay that kind of goes over a lot of proposals of what jealousy and envy are, and then he comes up with his own, giving counterexamples and like philosophers operate. And then it's just me after that and saying, no, I don't think Purse House has it quite right. And then I just, thinking on my own, decided that's the right analysis of each term. So what, are there intuitions you have on cases that
Yeah,
differ?
so like the Mitt Romney case, for me, I wouldn't, it's the, was this on Fox News that the commentator was saying this?
Excuse me?
Was it on Fox News that the commentator was saying
No.
this?
No, if I was
Well,
watching it.
well, if it
I'm
were
pretty sure-
Fox News,
I
I
think it
would
was CNN, CNN or NBC.
I mean,
Not
if
MSNBC.
it's almost irrelevant. If it were, Fox News that were saying this, I would say, well, they're using the term jealousy as opposed to envy because they don't want to give the biblical connotation to him not attending and giving in to his envy, right? Or in the case of, the teenager who is jealous of the girlfriend, my intuition is to say that she's envious of the girlfriend, and that can lead to, dire consequences if you start, following the girlfriend around and, doing these things.
Could have bad consequences.
Right.
But do you agree it doesn't always have bad consequences, envy? Could have good consequences if you emulate the person and try to equal him.
Well, see, this is my question. Like, to what extent are these terms defined biblically, and to what extent are they defined, I don't know, secularly, academically? Because my intuition tells me that envy always leads to negativity.
But don't you grant this possible scenario where I envy somebody his achievements and his altruism, and I strive then to achieve like he did and be as good and altruistic as he was?
Well, see, this is the point, that I would use the term jealousy in that case.
I don't know, Leila, if it turned out that we just absolutely switched completely, what you mean by jealousy and I mean by envy, then in a way I think we have a verbal dispute. And have I picked out these two distinct things?
Well, that's what I'm wondering. Is that because I agree with with
Analysis, but
your
if I
analysis,
put-
except that every time you use the word jealousy, and every time you use the word, I sort of have to shake my head and put it in that definition.
Can you tell me, I mean, John started to say this, but can you say more about why the biblical references use jealousy and envy the way they do? You
I
agree,
would-
John, that God can be jealous but not envious?
I would chalk it down to just interpretations and translations of the original Aramaic, and then or Hebrew into Aramaic, and that's just what stuck. The term jealousy has stuck over time, whereas envy, as a corollary, is.
Yeah, if we talk morally, I mean, maybe it would come, if it really did come to what I said, we're just absolutely opposite. Those cases I call the guys being jealous, you say they're envious, and vice versa. Then I really do think it's a verbal dispute.
Sure.
That we picked out kinds of mental states, and you call them jealous, and I call them envious, and vice
Right,
versa.
right.
And that would be okay with me. I would say, well, I don't know, then if we wanted to see, well, how does this reflect ordinary language now? Well, then we'd have to see, what do most people say about these cases? And I don't know, the one that I think is most convincing is the first one I gave of the two versions of Jane and Don. And did you say that I say when I just want to have that kind of relationship, I said I'm envious of Don.
Right.
And did you think I was jealous?
Yeah.
And the other case where I really want to have the relationship with only Jane and Don's getting in my way, I said I'm jealous.
That would be envy.
Okay, we're just.
But there's
think we
also
can
one
talk to each
significant
other.
difference, though.
What's
In
that?
your conclusion, I think you say that, now, do you say that jealousy and envy can both have positive outcomes
And negative.
and negative? I wouldn't say that envy would have any
But I give
positive
you
outcome.
the way you use, well, the what, oh. Now I guess I have to
The
translate
envy
you to
is
mean
ultimately
jealous.
destructive. Yeah.
So you agreed that what I call envy, the person, it could have good outcomes because I emulate the person who's altruistic and achieved good things in the world. That I call envy, you call jealousy.
Jealousy,
You
right.
agree then
Right. Jealousy
Layla
can.
jealousy could have good consequences. Now the other thing I call jealousy, I say that could also, I see that Don has characteristics A, B, C, which are really admirable characteristics. And he's with Jane, there's no chance with me with Jane. But then I think, man, I really should become ABC, just like Don. Because in the future, who knows, maybe I will, I almost said push Don off the bridge. He may fall off the bridge. And then I have traits A, B, and C. So I don't see why in principle it couldn't motivate me to develop good traits. I'll come to you in a minute, Brian, but he had in line. I
I'm
think.
sorry to go verbal too, but I'm a linguistics student. You mentioned on the Stanton-Anthony example that best was being used superlatively. And I was thinking there's another reading of this too, where, well, first of all, it's a reciprocal, we are best friends to each other. And if were you and I to start a friendship now, it could get better. And we could become best friends, but I could also be friends with someone else, and we can become better friends to some point where it's a best friendship. And I'm just wondering if two people can have a best friendship, can three people have a best friendship, can you be best friends to each other, but best isn't so much as a external superlative as it is a better than what we had was.
You think it's a hidden comparative?
It could go, there's an ambiguity there, I think.
Yes. Well, so I grant you this, and I'm just going to then stipulate that in the case, she did mean best so that it was exclusive. It's not possible for a third person to be best friends with either. She was using it that way. Whether it's actually used that way in English or not is beside the point for the point of the example.
Right. So it couldn't be almost as good friends because it's.
Yeah, I know we sometimes say, well, they're both my best friends. In a sense, like they're both the fastest car in the block. Now, really, that can't be true, but we use best loosely to mean it comes above some level, and so that's good enough to be best.
But she said that wasn't how she was.
No,
using
she wanted it so exclusive.
Okay. last hour, my ideas about envy and jealousy have become much more subtle, maybe over-subtilized. Before 12:30, here's what I thought.
Okay.
I suppose everybody knows the basic plot of Othello. So Othello and Desdemona are married, are very happy. Iago starts planting seeds of doubt in Othello's mind. Tells him to keep his eye on Cassio, because Cassio might be having a relationship with his wife. And then he says to him, "Beware, my lord, of jealousy. It is the green-eyed monster that doth mock the meat it feeds on." Now, why does he do this? He does this because he's angry that Othello has passed him over for promotion, has given this promotion to, in fact, Cassio. So in that basic situation, I would say that Iago is envious of Cassio's position and is getting back by planting the seed of jealousy. Now, when we say that Othello is jealous, who's he jealous of? We know that although Cassio has been mentioned, it's really in the common phrase. I think we say he's jealous of his wife, that he's afraid that she might be unfaithful. You know, why do we love these creatures? He says, we say we have these creatures but can't control their appetites. So then his mind runs riot with the idea of not a specific form of infidelity, but that his wife might. He said, in fact, when he kills her, he says, "I have to kill her, else she betray more men." So that seems to me a very clear example of jealousy. The motive for it is obviously envy. And yet in common usage, like your point, that the terms almost can flip-flop. In that case, I don't think they could flip, but you can see that there's a kind of muddle in the middle there somewhere.
Yeah. Okay, so to the last point you made, what I have to say is something similar to what I said to my colleague Catherine. That is, I think there is a lot of gray area where we don't quite know whether to say jealous or envious. And I'm trying to construct a theory that in a way makes the gray area not so gray. And so whatever virtues it has, because it's a theory that explains a lot of other cases. Now in your particular case, I think my analysis actually captures this, because the thing is, there's some unique good, namely the relationship with Desdemona, that is desired. And now he could be jealous sort of in general, because he's jealous. I want to put Don back here. If Don shows up in the play, he's jealous of Don, he's jealous of Cassio, he'd be jealous of anyone, any particular individual. So I'm not sure that you have to be, when I said, I gave an analysis of somebody be jealous of Y, some other person, but you could kind of generalize that and say he's jealous in general if there is some Y or Z or A or B, and then all those other conditions are met. And the crucial thing for me about jealousy is the idea that there's this unique good, namely his relationship with his wife, that factors in to this feeling that he gets. And in some case, he's jealous in the sense, I think it's used there as a kind of disposition to be actually jealous on the occasion where you'd be jealous, because you have a disposition, whether it's Cassio or Don or whoever it was, to have these feelings because you conceive your relationship to Desdemona as being a unique good. So that's the way I think I'd go, Brian, is saying, well, we can use jealous of the woman as a kind of disposition to be jealous in particular situations like involving Cassio.
Right, I agree with that.
So but that would make then kind of this analysis of the particular case being sort of logically, conceptually fundamental, and then you could say, well, and a person has a disposition to be jealous insofar as he's prone to feel jealous in these kinds of situations.
Right. Well, that's obviously Iago's agenda, to get him into that state where it doesn't matter who the other man, whether it's Don might appear. that doesn't matter. It's the state of mind that Iago's trying to induce in him,
Yes.
because he is so envious of Cassio's having
The position.
the captaincy that he wanted.
Yeah.
The comment about God's jealousy, I thought was pretty fascinating too. Surely that's related to the first commandment, right? I am the Lord thy God, thou shalt have no strange gods before me. I assume that's what we mean by the jealousy of God.
I see. He wants us to love
Only
him and
him.
only him.
Right, no strange gods.
That I take to be advice.
Yes. I think we can
It's
agree on
probably
that.
blasphemy, but Walter did tell you what what my view is about theism and the problem of evil, so I
Yes, that sounds pretty
tip
intriguing.
my hand.